Most cities are an answer the land gives, a deep harbor, a river, gold in the ground, a crossroads the world has to cross. Los Angeles was given none of these. In 1876, it was still a dusty Mexican pueblo on a dry plain, with no harbor, no river it could trust, and no reason for anyone to stay. By every rule of geography, it should have remained a small town forever. 40 years later, it was the fastest-growing city in America. It had nothing the land was willing to give, so it invented what it needed, one piece at a time.
I'm Arthur, and this is the city that talked itself into existence.
To understand how strange that is, you have to stand in the Los Angeles of 1876 and see how little there was to work with. It was a small Mexican town that had been founded back in 1781 by 44 settlers under a name so long almost no one used it in full, the town of Our Lady, the Queen of the Angels. A century later, it was still mostly adobe, low, flat-roofed houses of sun-dried brick with walls a yard thick gathered around a dusty plaza. To the north sat Sonora Town, the quarter of newcomers up from the Mexican state of Sonora. There were vineyards, a few scattered orange trees, cheap land, and a sun that did not quit. And almost nothing else. The ocean lay 20 miles off, but there was no harbor where a ship could dock. The Los Angeles River swelled in the winter storms and shrank to a thread the rest of the year. The town drank from it through the Zaña Madre, the Mother Ditch, a hand-dug canal fed by a dam of brushwood that the floods washed away most winters. There were no mines, no factories, and the nearest real city, San Francisco, lay 400 miles north and was 10 times larger. The place had almost nothing a growing city was supposed to need. Then came the day that was supposed to change everything. On the 5th of September, 1876, after the county had paid a small fortune in subsidies to lure it south, the Southern Pacific drove its last rail through the mountains and linked the town, for the first time, to the rest of the country by rail. And for nearly 10 years, almost nothing happened. A railroad, it turns out, only brings empty track. The trains rolled in half full. The town was connected to the nation now, but it still had no reason for anyone to climb down and stay. So a handful of men decided that if the land would not give the town a reason to exist, they would manufacture one and sell it to the rest of America like a bottled cure.
What they were selling was the weather.
Men like Harrison Gray Otis, who ran the Los Angeles Times, and the writer Charles Fletcher Lummis turned the newspaper and the pamphlet into weapons. They packaged the climate as a product: sunshine all year, air that was said to heal the sick, a land of perpetual spring. They shipped crates of fruit and glossy pamphlets to every frozen corner of the country and mounted entire exhibitions of oranges in eastern halls, advertising a paradise most of their readers had never seen. Against the gray winters of the East, they held up a single glowing image: an orange ripening in December. The fruit became the emblem of the whole dream. The first trainload of nothing but oranges rolled east in 1886, and as the refrigerated railcar improved, California's fruit reached the entire country, carrying with it a picture of the warm, easy place where it grew. And the climate was sold not only as pleasure, but as medicine. In an age when the one treatment doctors could offer for tuberculosis, the slow killer they called consumption, was warm, dry air, the boosters promised precisely that. One railroad man declared that Los Angeles was destined to become the sanitarium of the Union. The sick came west by the trainload, chasing a cure, until a whole belt of sanitariums spread along the foothills east of the city. The town was being advertised, quite literally, as a place that could keep you alive. And then the price of getting there collapsed. In 1885, a second railroad, the Santa Fe, finally reached Los Angeles and shattered the Southern Pacific's monopoly. and the two fell into a war over fares, each burning money to undercut the other. The ticket from the Missouri River to Los Angeles, normally well over $100, tumbled through the spring of 1887 to $50, to $20, to a few dollars, until on one frantic day in March, it touched a single dollar for a ride of nearly 2,000 miles. The country came west in a flood. Real estate dealers carved the open plain into brand new towns that existed only on paper and sold the lots at auctions with brass bands and free lunch. The numbers grew wild and boastful. In that frenzied stretch, it was said that $100 million in property changed hands, that hundreds of thousands poured off the trains. Most of them were tourists and speculators, not settlers. And in the spring of 1888, the bubble burst. The auctions fell silent. Half the paper towns dissolved back into brush and jackrabbits, their surveyed streets fading into the dust, marked only by rail spurs that now led nowhere. But the crash left something standing. Across that single decade, the city had grown from 11,000 people to 50,000, and the ones who stayed did not leave. Los Angeles had conjured a population out of sunshine and a $1 ticket. The boom had failed, and yet it had proven the one thing that would define the city forever. It could be sold.
A crowd, though, is not a city. For all it had conjured, Los Angeles still had no harbor.
No water it could trust, and nothing beneath the ground worth digging. So it set about building the things the land had refused to provide, beginning with a doorway to the sea it did not have. Take the harbor. A great city needs a doorway to the sea, and Los Angeles did not have one. Collis Huntington, who owned the Southern Pacific, tried to supply a private one of his own at Santa Monica, throwing out a wharf nearly a mile long into open water, for a time the longest pier in the world, while quietly using his power in Washington to block any rival. The city fought back. Led by a sharp-tongued lawyer named Stephen White, it waged a 7-year battle for what people called a free harbor, a public one, beholden to no railroad. In 1897, a federal board ruled against Huntington and chose the marshy shallows of San Pedro instead. And in 1899, the work began. A town 20 miles from the coast set about dredging itself a deep-water port out of a mudflat. And to make certain the prize was truly its own, the city did something stranger still. It reached out a thin arm of itself and seized the coast. On the day after Christmas in 1906, Los Angeles annexed a ribbon of land 16 miles long and, in places, barely half a mile wide, like two shoestrings knotted together, running all the way from the city down to the water. 3 years later, it absorbed the harbor towns of San Pedro and Wilmington outright. The landlocked town had given itself a waterfront. Then the ground gave up a secret. In 1892, a failed miner named Edward Dominghan noticed the cart rolling through downtown with a black tar clinging to its wheels, asked where it had come from, and went digging. Near the heart of the city, he and a partner began sinking a shaft by hand. When the digging grew too deep, they rigged a sharpened eucalyptus trunk as a crude drill, dropping it again and again to pound their way down, until the oil rose. Within a few years, whole neighborhoods bristled with wooden derricks standing so close their legs nearly touched, pumping crude in back gardens and vacant lots and right up against the porches of the houses. People lived among the steady groan of the pumps and the smell of oil, watching their own yards turn into a forest of timber and machinery. California became one of the great oil producers on Earth, and the improbable town discovered it had been sitting on a fortune the whole time. And to bind a city that was spreading out across a flat and centerless plain, a man named Henry Huntington spun out from 1901 a web of electric trolleys, the red cars, that grew into the largest interurban railway on Earth. They were never only transport, they were a machine for selling land, reaching out to empty fields their owner had already bought so that new neighborhoods sprouted along the rails wherever they ran. By 1900, the trick towns had become a real city of 100,000 people with a port carved out of mud, oil beneath its houses, and red trains stitching it across the plain. It had manufactured nearly everything the land had denied it. Nearly, because all of it still rested on a river that ran dry half the year, and there were now far too many mouths for that thin stream to fill. The invented city was about to run out of the one thing money alone could not buy. So one self-taught man went looking for water, 250 miles away.
The man was William Mulholland.
He had come over from Ireland with no schooling and no money.
And taken a job cleaning the city's water ditches, a zanjero, the lowest rung there was. But he read engineering by candlelight at night, and he rose year by year until the self-taught ditch cleaner ran the entire water department. He had no diploma and no powerful friends. What he had was the city's trust, earned one repair at a time. He was said to know every pipe under Los Angeles the way a father knows his children. As the city reached past 100,000 and kept climbing, Mulholland could see the arithmetic turning against him. The local water would not stretch much further. It was a former mayor, Fred Eaton, who showed him the answer. Far to the north, at the foot of the snow-capped Sierra Nevada, lay the Owens Valley, where snowmelt had a generous river through green pasture land. The plan was simple to say and staggering to do. Take that river and carry it more than 230 miles across desert and mountain to Los Angeles, using nothing but gravity, letting the water fall downhill the entire way. It also meant taking the river from a valley that called it its life. Beginning in 1908, thousands of men, as many as 4,000 at a time, spent 5 years building it. They were a rough, drifting army fanning out across the Mojave with their bedrolls on their backs, laboring in heat that could blister bare skin. They drove 164 tunnels through the mountains by hand and by blasting powder. The longest, the Elizabeth Tunnel, ran 5 miles straight through solid granite and set an American record for hard rock digging that stood for years. They hauled steel pipe across the desert by mule teams and welded it into siphons that dropped into canyons and climbed out the far side. They built a railroad and a power plant for the sole purpose of building the aqueduct. For 5 years in that empty country, men were carving a river where none had ever run. It is the 5th of November, 1913, and you are high in the dry hills above the San Fernando Valley, one of 40,000 who have gathered in the dust under a bright sky. Below you runs a great concrete staircase, a cascade, sloping down out of the mountains, and it is bone dry. A band is playing. Cannons have been fired. Everyone is watching the empty chute. Then, far up the slope, the gates are opened and something appears at the top of the cascade. A white wall of foaming water throwing spray into the air, roaring down the steps toward the crowd. The cheering drowns the band. Some break ranks and scramble down toward the channel to cup the water in their hands. And William Mulholland, a plain man unable to make himself heard over the din, simply turns to the mayor beside him, raises his hand toward the flood, and speaks 5 words the city would never forget. There it is, take it. That water did not come from nothing, and the men on that hillside knew it. Far to the north, the Owens River had been cut off from the valley that had drunk it for generations. The harm was not loud and it was not instant. But in the years that followed, as Los Angeles grew greener, the pastures of the north began, quietly, to fade. The slow start of a countdown that would one day leave that valley a basin of dust. Los Angeles had bought itself a future.
The bill was simply sent somewhere else. With the river in its grasp, nothing could hold the city back. The San Fernando Valley, watered by the aqueduct, was annexed into Los Angeles and doubled its size at a stroke. The crowd a $1 ticket had once lured west now had more than enough to drink to multiply toward 1 million. The invented city was at last complete.
And yet the thing that would carry its name to every corner of the earth was none of these.
Not the harbor, not the oil, not the river. All of those had only kept the city alive. What Los Angeles had truly learned to make, better than any city on the planet, was not a thing at all. It was an image of itself. Sunshine, oranges, a better life waiting at the end of the line. And it turned out that the very same endless sun could be put to a new use. Around 1910, a group of filmmakers fleeing a patent monopoly back east, Thomas Edison's grip on the movie business, discovered that in Southern California, the sun let them film outdoors all year, the land was cheap, and Edison's courts were a continent away. In a barn rented among the orange and lemon trees, at the corner of Selma and Vine, a young director named Cecil B. DeMille shot the first feature-length film made in a quiet town called Hollywood. Within a few years, that corner of orchards would be the film capital of the world. Before long, most of the moving pictures watched anywhere in America were being made in that one sunny town. The city that had spent 40 years inventing reasons to exist had begun to manufacture the one product no geography can ever grant or deny, the dream itself, printed on a strip of film and sold to everyone, everywhere. The orange groves that had first sold that dream were torn out, row by row, to build the city the oranges had promised. The orchards that once carpeted the basin vanished under streets and houses and studio lots. And of all those millions of trees, one still stands, though you have to drive an hour east of the city to find it, on a small traffic island in Riverside. It is the parent navel orange tree, the single plant from which California's entire orange industry was budded, set in the ground in 1873 by a woman named Eliza Tibbets, who, so the story goes, kept it alive in its first dry years on the water she had washed her dishes in, because no canal yet reached her. It is well over a century old now, and every winter it still fruits, one small tree heavy with oranges, ringed now by the endless city it had helped conjure into being, the last living root of an advertisement that grew into a metropolis.
Los Angeles conjured itself out of a dry Mexican pueblo, with no harbor and no river.
But another American city conjured a vision of the future out of a soggy marsh. Chicago built a gleaming white city of plaster and electric light that lasted only one summer. Watch my Chicago reconstruction to see how they built the impossible.
Subscribe to the channel, and let's keep reviving the past together. See you on the next journey.
Before we finish, I want to take a moment to recognize the people appearing on screen right now. To the members of this channel, thank you so much. Your ongoing support is what motivates me and helps keep this project alive. If you enjoy what we do here and would like to directly support the channel, I invite you to click the Join button down below. To our members and to everyone who is simply watching this video, thank you for your time.